Welcome to the Pardes channel. Today we explain Prophets Joshua chapter 4 in a clear and simple way, step by step. Okay, let's dive right into this. I want you to really picture the scene for a moment. The mighty, rushing waters of the Jordan River have been miraculously cut off. They are literally standing in a heap, and an entire nation is crossing over, right? On dry ground, straight into the Promised Land. I mean, it is a moment of sheer, absolute awe. But you have to ask, what happens exactly in the immediate aftermath of a massive miracle like that? Well, that's exactly what we're going to explore today. We're going to walk through the original Hebrew Tanakh text of this event step by step, verse by verse, so you can see exactly how this historic crossing unfolded.
Now, just to set our boundaries right from the start, we are anchoring our focus entirely on chapter 4. We aren't going to talk about the rest of the book today, and we're not zooming out for general biblical history. We are exploring the plain, simple meaning of this specific text. It's what's known as the Peshat. We're going to look at the who, what, where, and why, and we're doing it without skipping any details or, jumping into deep mystical or symbolic interpretations. We're just looking at the clear, straightforward events exactly as they were recorded.
Here is our chronological breakdown for today. First, the 12 memorial stones. Second, the nation crosses over. Third, the Jordan River returns. Fourth, the monument at Gilgal. And finally, some practical life lessons. Let's get into it.
Section 1, the 12 memorial stones. This covers verses 1 through 9.
So the text picks up right at the exact moment the entire nation has just finished crossing the dry riverbed. The tension is incredibly high, the people are finally safe on the other side, and immediately, God speaks to Joshua. Verse 1 tells us this happens when all the nation were, quote, clean passed over. Now that's an archaic phrase from our 1917 translation, but in plain, modern English, it simply means they had completely finished crossing. Literally, not a single person was left behind. And at that exact moment, God issues a really fascinating command. He tells Joshua to take men and command them to take stones right out of the middle of the Jordan River. And not just from anywhere in the river, but specifically from the very spot where the priests' feet were standing firm on the dry ground.
The absolutely crucial point here is this number, 12. Joshua selects 12 men, representing one from every single tribe of Israel. He commands each man to go all the way back into the middle of the river, right in front of the ark of the Lord, and hoist a massive stone up on his shoulder. One stone for each of the 12 tribes. Honestly, this is a brilliant logistical and spiritual move. It completely unifies the entire nation in this task. Absolutely no tribe is left out of building this physical memory.
But you have to wonder, why are they carrying heavy rocks out of a riverbed in the first place? Well, Joshua explains the purpose in verse 6, and it's a really profound one. He says this is to be a sign so that in the future, when your children ask, "What mean ye by these stones?" you'll actually have an answer. These stones aren't just rocks. They are pedagogical tools. They are designed specifically to provoke curiosity from future children who obviously weren't there to see the miracle themselves. When they ask, the parents are commanded to tell the amazing story of how the waters of the Jordan were cut off before the Ark of the Covenant.
Now, verse 8 tells us they carried 12 stones out of the river to their lodging place. But check out this incredible detail in verse 9. Joshua actually set up another 12 stones right in the middle of the Jordan River, exactly where the priests holding the ark had stood. So there are actually two sets of stones. There was one monument visible on land for future generations to see, and one hidden monument swallowed up by the river, permanently marking the epicenter of the miracle. It's just a fascinating detail about building physical monuments, both the ones that are seen and the ones that remain unseen.
Moving right along to section 2, the nation crosses over, covering verses 10 through 14.
Now, the narrative shifts its perspective away from the 12 men grabbing stones and goes back to the mechanics of the crossing itself. It focuses on the priests and a massive armed guard. The text is very, very clear about the strict chronological sequence of this miracle. The priests, bearing the ark, walked into the river first, and verse 10 says they stood in the midst of the Jordan until everything was finished. They completely anchored the event. While they stood there, holding back the waters by the power of God, the text explicitly says that the people hastened and passed over. They hurried. I mean, you would too, right? Once everyone was completely across and those 12 stones were taken, only then did the ark of the Lord and the priests finally cross over in front of the watching people.
But keep in mind, the people weren't just some disorganized crowd. The text highlights a massive number in verse 13, 40,000. These were the fully armed men of the tribes of Reuben, Gad, and the half-tribe of Manasseh. They passed over totally armed for battle in the presence of the Lord, leading the way to the plains of Jericho. They had promised Moses years earlier that they would help their brothers fight for the land, and here they are. They are keeping that promise, marching right at the front of the line. And the result of all this coordination and divine intervention is summarized perfectly in verse 14. On that day, the Lord magnified Joshua in the sight of all Israel. This massive logistical and miraculous event completely cemented Joshua's leadership. The text says the people feared or revered Joshua just as they had revered Moses all the days of his life. He wasn't just Moses' assistant anymore. He was the undeniable leader chosen by God.
Section 3, the Jordan River returns. Verses 15 through 18.
So the people are across. The memorial stones are secure. The 40,000 armed men are ready. The only ones left in the dry, terrifyingly exposed riverbed are the priests holding the ark. The Lord speaks to Joshua again and gives the absolute final directive regarding the crossing. He says, "Command the priests that bear the ark of the testimony that they come up out of the Jordan." Imagine the sheer tension of this moment. For hours they have stood in the deepest part of the river basin while literally millions walked past. Now Joshua commands them, "Come ye up out of the Jordan," and they finally begin the climb up the riverbank.
And what happens next is just beautifully contrasted in verse 18. As soon as the priests holding the ark step out, the very second the soles of their feet are drawn up onto the dry ground of the riverbank, the forces of nature are released. The waters of the Jordan instantaneously return to their place. The text says it went over all its banks as aforetime, which simply means just exactly as it had before. The miracle began the moment their feet touched the water, and the miracle ended the exact moment their feet left the riverbed.
Section 4, the monument at Gilgal, covering verses 19 through 24.
So the river is flowing again, separating them completely from the wilderness they just left behind. Now we look at the immediate aftermath of the crossing and where they actually set up camp. Verse 19 tells us the exact date, the 10th day of the first month. They come up out of the Jordan and encamp in a place called Gilgal, which is located on the east border of Jericho. It is here at Gilgal that Joshua takes that first set of 12 stones, the ones the men literally carried on their shoulders out of the river, and he physically builds the monument.
When he addresses the Israelites, Joshua draws a really explicit, undeniable textual connection. He tells them to explain to their future children that Israel came over the Jordan on dry land. But why? Well, verse 23 spells it out perfectly. For the Lord your God dried up the waters of Jordan from before you, as the Lord your God did to the Red Sea. He is telling this completely new generation that the God who saved their parents from Egypt at the Red Sea is the exact same God who just brought them into Canaan. The miracle is repeated, totally solidifying God's continued presence with them.
So what is the ultimate purpose of this physical monument at Gilgal? Verses 23 and 24 summarize it beautifully in these 4 distinct points. First, to remember the literal historical crossing on dry land. Second, to provide a tangible answer when children ask questions, which sparks this incredible multi-generational education. Third, its purpose is global, so that all the peoples of the earth may know the hand of the Lord, that it is mighty. And finally, its purpose is internal, to ensure that Israel reveres and fears the Lord their God forever. Grounded entirely in the simple, literal meaning of the text, this monument was a real cornerstone of their national identity.
And finally, Section 5, Practical Life Lessons. Let's look at how we apply this text today.
How do we take this ancient historical event from Prophets Joshua chapter 4 and actually apply it to our everyday lives right now? Well, we can extract 3 very straightforward, powerful lessons. First, recognize the miracles, both big and small, that occur in your own life. Seriously, don't let them just pass by unnoticed. Second, build tangible physical reminders of those moments. Just as Joshua used literal river stones, we need physical things, a journal, a photo, a keepsake, to anchor our memories. Because memory isn't passive, right? It requires deliberate action. And third, use those reminders to actively teach the next generation. When your kids or your friends ask about the stones in your life, you need to be ready to tell the story of what you've been brought through.
I'll leave you with this provocative question to really think about. What physical stones are you setting up right now for the next generation to ask about? Your legacy depends on the monuments you build today. Thank you for learning with us. If this helped you understand the chapter better, like, subscribe, and join us for the next chapter.